And the webinar has started. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining yet another webinar from the How About Some Marketing series. Today is March 28th, but as we have got accustomed for the past almost a year so far, the last Wednesday of every month is from 7 p.m. EST is reserved to one of our webinars. How about some marketing? My name is Emanuel Petrescu. I'm the founder of How About Some Marketing. I'm an SEO and digital marketing consultant, a T-shaped marketer with an expertise on SEO, and I like to help businesses get more revenue from digital marketing channels, search, social, and paid advertising. How about some marketing? Is a marketing hub where we help small to medium sized businesses become big businesses through education, coaching, and mindset reframing. I like to think that it's the go to hub with straightforward, no nonsense marketing guidance, and we focus on clear, actionable strategies and resources designed for everyday needs of small to medium sized businesses. No jargon, no overly complicated tactics, just effective marketing insights that you can apply directly to your business for real results. Now, if you haven't done so, please go to howaboutsomemarketing.com and subscribe to the newsletter. It's a big form. It's unlikely that you're going to miss it because that's the uh, newsletter you want to be subscribed to. How about that as a compelling argument? Now, moving along to today's session, branding. It's an honor and a privilege to introduce tonight's guest, Dan Couvrette. I'll let Dan introduce himself as well and give a few notes on who he is, his background, and how did he ended up where he is today in a good position. Um, by no means. I like to say a few words about the relationship I have with Dan and how I got to have him a guest on my show. Dan has been actually the second boss, but my longest boss since I came to Canada. He ran a marketing agency where I used to work, and he gave me an opportunity to shine, as I like to say, or at least I like to think. I've been working closely with him for a few good years, and I learned a lot. I tell this with each session, each webinar. If I am somewhere today, is because I stood on the shoulders of giants, and Dan is one of those other giants that I stood on their shoulders and helped me get to where I am today. Thank you so much, Dan.
Oh,
Now,
you're very welcome.
back to you. I'm going to transfer the virtual spotlight on you, and you're going to, now it's all on you, sir.
Oh, gee, that's a lot of pressure, Emmanuel. But welcome everybody to this webinar. I'll give you a little bit about my background. If you look behind me, you'll see that I like art. I'm also an artist. I'm not selling my paintings these days, but if you want, you can go to dancouvrette.com and you can see my art. None of what is behind me is my own. So I'm going to talk to you about branding today, and we'll start out by me giving you a bit of my own background so you have a sense of whether you want to stay on this webinar or not. After I tell you what I've done, you may decide this isn't for you, but hopefully you'll stick around. I'm 69 years old, by the way, and I sold my business that Emmanuel mentioned, Divorce Marketing Group, 2 years ago. And I'm presently working with my son, and I'm going to talk about his company today. But I'll go back to the beginning and very briefly talk about the businesses that I was involved in as a partner, and a bit about the branding that we did for those firms that I was involved in. And I'm also going to talk about my successes and my failures, because I don't know, maybe you've had a business and it didn't succeed. And or maybe you're thinking about starting a business, or maybe you work for somebody else. So I don't exactly know what position you're in, but I'm going to kind of hopefully hit information that would be of use to you no matter what position you're in, thinking about actively wanting to change or working for somebody else. So I started my business life with Ottawa City Life magazine, and we branded it as what Ottawans need to know about Ottawa. We were a small company, and we were just about going to go bankrupt when a company called Key Publishers, who is Toronto Life magazine, used to be owned by Key Publishers. So if you know Toronto Life magazine, we had a magazine similar to that in Ottawa. And we turned it into what is now, or was, called Ottawa Magazine. But it was essentially the same thing. It was a magazine for Ottawans, about Ottawans, and our message to advertisers was that we know the Ottawa market, we can help you reach people in Ottawa. We were also targeting, our specific target audience was upper middle income people in Ottawa. So we distributed the magazine for free. So our message to advertisers was, we've got the attention of these people. We did surveys and studies to reaffirm to them or confirm to them that we had the audience, that they were interested in our magazine. We had a good looking magazine, and we could effectively distribute it exactly where they wanted to reach. So that was our the premise of the magazine and the premise of our branding, that if you want to reach upscale people in Ottawa with a very nice looking magazine and present your information to them, Ottawa Magazine could do that for you. I then moved on to a magazine called Wedding Bells Magazine, which is kind of obviously a magazine for weddings. And I was invited to join that company. It was owned by a woman named Edna Hall. And she was a great partner. And I'm going to talk about partnerships as well. You may not think that in a branding session, we're going to talk about partnerships and organization, but yeah, sometimes great partners or bad ones can be an impediment to properly branding your company, or getting it up and running, or making it a success. So I think in the introduction information about this, I said that I would be talking about branding in rather a broad perspective, because I think of it as touching a lot of different pieces when it comes to business. So Wedding Bells Magazine, the brand was the best wedding magazine for Canadian brides. Yes, we did have information in there for the grooms, but we were clearly wanting to reach the brides. And we had the thickest magazine in Canada. At one point, the magazine was 1,000 pages in size. And I've seen it recently on a newsstand. It might be 500 pages or 400 pages or even 300 pages now, because so much has, of course, gone online. The magazine was started by my business partner, and she believed that if you produce a high quality magazine, there was already a competitor, by the way, in the marketplace when we opened Wedding Bells Magazine. It was a magazine called Today's Bride Magazine. But Edna and I believed that we could do a better job, produce a higher quality magazine. That meant that we spent more money on photography. We spent more money with production, meaning that we had better designers for our magazine. We spent more money on printing the magazine. We went for a higher quality, glossy, high gloss cover. The paper was thicker, because we were trying to attract not only the fashion clients, but we were trying to attract the tableware clients. The magazine was a huge success. I sold my interest in that magazine years and years ago, and did very well with that. It was because I had a great partner who had a great concept, great branding. We both worked like dogs, and that's one of the things that, unfortunately, if you're in business, at some point you're going to have to work harder than you probably thought you'd ever have to work. I moved on from Wedding Bells Magazine to Divorce Magazine. I know it's a little ironic to be going from weddings to divorce. And what I want to mention about Divorce Magazine is that when I started it, I had a partner at the time. Her name is Diana Shepard. And the idea was mine because I went through my own divorce, and I approached Diana, who coincidentally had worked at Wedding Bells Magazine with me. And I said, Diana, I have this idea. I'm going through my own divorce, as you know, and I think that people out in the world need some information and help who are going through divorce. And I think, Diana, that I could probably get some advertising from lawyers, mediators, mental health professionals, financial professionals. There's probably a market of professionals, particularly, and maybe even services like moving companies and real estate agents who want to reach divorcing people. She thought it was a great idea. So we started kind of banding about the idea a bit. And people said, well, gee, this is going back 30 years ago, by the way. You can't call the magazine Divorce Magazine. That's just a little too shocking. You'll have to call it something like Transitions or Moving On or some name like that. Well, we talked it over for quite a while and we thought, well, the magazine is about divorce. And if you want to catch people's attention, we better call it Divorce Magazine. We eventually had editions in California, Texas, Florida, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, and Toronto. And we had a huge website that had over 3 million visitors a year, divorcemag.com. We also own divorcemoms.com. The branding stayed the same even when we added the other products and services. And that was that we were providing people who were considering divorce, going through a divorce, or recently divorced with help and guidance. It wasn't a salacious rag that talked about how to get back at your spouse or beat them up or say horrible things to them. Or no, it was not about that. It was clearly and always stayed to the same message. That is help for people who are going through divorce or considering divorce or recently divorced. So we were able to take the magazine and the website, because we started the magazine and the website on the same day, March 18th, 1996. And the message was always the same, that was providing helpful information. So we took that message to the lawyers, the family lawyers, or what most people would call divorce lawyers. And we told them, here's what we're doing. Do you want to advertise in our magazine? Most of them had never advertised before. And so this was completely new to them. A lot of them told us they would never advertise, that they told us they would never do many things that they ended up doing. They would never have websites, which of course every family lawyer does. They told us they'd never be on Facebook, which every family lawyer is. They told us they'd never have a LinkedIn page, which every one of them does, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we were at the leading edge in the wedding business, we were at the leading edge, but also in the divorce business, we were at the leading edge in terms of providing information and resources. And so we stuck to our brand. It changed, it evolved. It actually evolved into Divorce Marketing Group. So we went from having a website and a magazine to being a full service marketing agency. My wife joined the company full-time at that point, and it was about 17 years ago that she joined. And so what we became, our branding message was, we were a one-stop shop for family lawyers when it came to branding and marketing. So anything and everything that they needed to help them brand and market their family law practices, primarily, that was our primary audience, we could do for them. So we sat down with many of our clients and figured out their branding message. And I'm going to share some of the ways that we went about doing that in this presentation. One of the things I want to say before we get too deep into this is that it's important, if you're in business, thinking about getting into business or even work for somebody else, is to know your own strengths and weaknesses. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to business owners, whether it was back in my Ottawa Magazine days or my Wedding Bell days or Divorce Magazine days, who had no idea whatsoever what branding was, who had no idea whatsoever what marketing was, who had no idea what the consequences were of not properly branding or marketing their firms. And it's frightening that so many businesses are run by people who don't think they need outside help. I would suggest when it comes to branding, you're probably going to need to do a lot of research if you're going to do it yourself to understand what's good and what's bad branding. And you're going to need professionals if you don't have the time, energy, or inclination, or expertise, know-how, or willingness to learn about it, because it's a complicated subject, and you really can make a lot of mistakes. Because the branding of your firm, when I get a little bit deeper into this subject, the branding of your firm really represents what you want to, what your priorities are in business. So if you focus more on what your priorities are and what your product is and or your service is, if you focus on creating the best you can in that area, perhaps you and your partner, if it's not just you, if you can focus on that, somebody who understands marketing will likely do a better job of figuring out how to brand whatever your product service is. I've also been involved, as I think I mentioned, in two things. First, I have no personal agenda in doing this presentation. I'm not selling people on my branding and marketing company. I'm not in that business anymore. I'm working with my son. I'm not selling any widgets. I'm not selling coaching. I'm not selling anything. I mention it because you have to be careful when you're talking to somebody about pretty well anything in business, because everybody's got their own agenda, and to make sure that you're clear about what you're buying. So right now, you're not buying anything from me. I've also been involved in a couple of businesses that failed. That I mentioned Ottawa City Life magazine, that we were not succeeding. We were going to go bankrupt, had key publishers knocked on our door and said, hey, we think if you stop doing your magazine and we stop doing our hotel magazine that we're sending out to households in Ottawa, that if we create one magazine, we'd be a lot better off. And thank goodness they came and knocked on the door, because we would have been out of business. And then another time I owned a toner cartridge business, a recycled toner cartridge business with a friend of mine. And we both found after about a year that we didn't like that business. We weren't being successful. And for many reasons, we sold the business. I learned a lot of lessons from those two experiences. So if you've been in business and haven't done well, consider it that you've learned some lessons, and make sure you pay attention to situations where you don't do well, because you're likely going to learn more from that than when you succeed. Often you don't know why you succeeded. You just happen to succeed. So don't take failure as a negative. Take it as a positive. There's always something you can learn from it. I want to mention some of the partnerships. I've mentioned that I've been a partner in a number of businesses. Actually, all my businesses I've been a partner in the last 17 years with my wife, which is slightly different than having an outside partner, but nevertheless, it's a partnership. And everybody says, well, there must be a lot of compromise in partnerships. And the truth is, there's compromise in partnerships. There's compromise when you're working for somebody. There's compromise in big companies. But sometimes there's no place for compromise. And when it comes to branding, you need a clear and definite message. Hopefully you'll agree on that message if you are in a company or if you're in a partnership or something, situation like that. But sometimes compromise isn't the right answer. I'll give you an example. Let's say your partner thinks that the color red is the color that you should have on your firm logo. And you think, gee, I want the color green on the firm logo because my product should be green because it's environmentally safe and we want to promote that. And the person says, yes, but red is more powerful. If you combine green and red, the color you get is unfortunately a very ugly brown. And I don't think anybody, the only company I can think of is UPS that has a brown logo. It seems to work for them, but pretty well anybody else, brown logos just are horrible. That's what I would describe as being a decision, a branding decision made from compromise. It's not always the best decision. If you look at the most successful companies like Apple, companies like Tesla, companies like Amazon, all of those companies have had, in the case of Apple, a very strong leader in the company. And I would suspect, I haven't sat in their boardrooms or in their meetings, but I suspect that those heads of the company made ultimate decisions on a number of things. And it's that clear, consistent direction that can make a big difference when it comes to branding. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Sure, compromise is necessary in business, absolutely. But you should definitely lean towards the person who seems to have the most aptitude and most ability, no matter what the subject is or what is being worked on in a business. Make sure you lean on that person the most and try and keep yourself out of conversations where you're not the expert. You can't be expert in everything. Work with experts and then have the person who's most expert in your company help be the liaison with them, help them figure out what the message is for your branding. We're going to get more into detail about that. But just because you're the boss or just because you're the head of something, don't make the mistake of thinking that you have to have all the answers. It can really be a detriment to you in business. And I've learned that through 45 years of being in business. Let somebody who knows more than you do take the rein and lead the charge, and you'll get a far better product out of that. I also know that from my own personal experience that, in a business, you want your branding message to be consistent. You want it to be something that people can easily recognize. So I'll just use Apple. I've been using Apple computers for as long as they've been around. Being in the publishing business, everybody in publishing always used Apple computers. Back then, Steve Jobs was known as being a pretty tough boss. Second best would never do. He wanted to be on the leading edge. So his personal branding, that was his personal branding, and it flowed over into the company. Innovation, of course, was an incredible, important part of his company. But we always knew that by Don Garnett, Apple was going to come out with the best product. They were going to be revolutionary. You knew that because the person behind the business, the Steve Jobs, was going to make sure that that happened. The same thing would be true for Amazon. The same thing would be true for Tesla. Those leaders have a specific mantra and they have a specific branding message that they put out in the world. Like them or not, and whether you use their products or not, you probably would agree that they are strong leaders with strong brands and strong products, ones you can count on. They have that going for them. Whether you use them or not, it's another matter. That's a whole other conversation. Inconsistency in branding is, as I've mentioned, is dangerous because your customers don't know who you are, what you do, why you do it, and what they can count on you for. I'm going to delve a little bit more into the process of branding, but if your clients or potential clients can't answer those questions, who you are, what you do, what you can be counted on for, then you're going to have a real problem out in the marketplace, whether you have a product, whether you have a service, or you have both. You might have both. So if you plan to go into business or stay in business, because the success rate of business is very low. If you looked at my introduction text to this seminar, you'll see that 50 to 75% of businesses fail within the first 3 years, and something like 90 to 95% fail within the first 10 years. So my goodness, who would ever want to go into business with those kind of numbers? It would be unbelievable to even consider going into business if that was the case. So you want to be sure before you go into business that you have figured out your product and you've tested it in the market as best as you can, your product or service, you've tested in the market with friends, family, colleagues, somehow you've tested it as best as you can. It's often best not to make a lot of noise about your business or your product before you have a chance to test it out in the market, however you do that. Now, if you're a big company, you're going to do testing in a variety of different ways if you have a budget for that. If you're a small company or a solo person, you'll have to go and do that testing yourself and figure out how best to bring your product to market, how best to position your product, and we're going to go deeper into that now. Now, why do businesses fail? Well, it's sometimes is because the product or service is just wrong. That happens. Lots of times people think ideas are great. I've had many people pitch me on investing in a potential business, and honestly, I just didn't think it was a great idea. I'm not the guru of business, but I saw that probably half a dozen of those people who came and pitched me never got the business going. Well, they got it started and it didn't succeed. There's businesses I did invest in that did very well. And it's because the person had a very clear vision and I knew their background. I knew what they could be counted on. So their personal guarantees, their personal expertise, and their personal insights into the marketplace led me to invest in it. And then fortunately, those businesses were successful. It also can be the timing can be wrong in your business. And so you have to be sure that the timing is right. If you're the leader into a field that doesn't exist, you may take a beating, and the next person who comes along may be the one who actually makes a business of it. And then, of course, the branding might be wrong, and I'm going to touch more on that right now. So when you think of a company like Amazon, what do you think of? Well, what I think of is that they originally started selling books. And some of you, or all of you, may have purchased books, as I did, from Amazon years ago. And then they obviously evolved. But the foundation of the business never changed. Their mode of delivery never changed. What you could count on Amazon for never changed. They were always an online company. That never changed. So if you stop somebody on the street and say, what do you think of Amazon? I would think that 9 out of 10 people would say, great products. You can get anything you want. Delivery is unbelievable. How fast you get things, unbelievable. And that would be about it for Amazon. So how did they go about creating that branding message? Well, number one, um, Jeff Bezos was very committed to creating a strong company, and he had a clear vision for what he wanted to do. He could basically see the future, and he could see that online was the way to go for getting products to people. Started off with books, and he stuck with that. And the message, he changed and evolved the company, but that initial concept never changed. He just added product to it. And so now he has quick delivery, great customer service would be the two probably top things that you think of. He added products to a system that was already working. And you know what? Amazon didn't make money for 9 years. Very few companies can last that long. It certainly lasts that long for 9 years without making money. But he had backers who believed in him, and obviously he was selling shares on the stock market, and the stock market shares were going up and up and up because people believed in the concept, even though it wasn't profitable. You can look at other companies, of course. It's always good to look at big companies who are successful to try and figure out what they did. And there's many books and podcasts and webinars about all these companies. So if you're really interested in marketing, look at what successful people have done. They will give you the most information. So what is branding? I've kind of talked on here a bit about branding, but let's just talk about the basics. It is the process of creating a distinct identity for a business in the minds of your target audience and the general population. At its core, branding consists of a company's name and logo, visual identity, design, mission, values, and tone of voice. That's quite a bit when you start breaking it down, but that's what branding is. Simply put, branding is a way of letting the world know what you do or offer, who should hire your firm or buy your product, and the kind of clients you want. That's your branding message. Done properly, branding will help reduce the amount of time it will take somebody to figure out if what you have is something that they want. So branding can show up, of course, in your website. The message on your website needs to be clear and consistent, and share information that's going to tell people, is this the product for you, or is this not the product or service for you? If you're a professional, you have a personal brand, like it or not. If you're working within a company, you're professional, you're maybe a lawyer, a dentist, a doctor, you have a brand, your own personal brand. People learn to understand what they can count on from you. They may know about your firm as well, but you're actually your own brand. And that's true for people who are in real estate, for example. I don't know how many people are using a particular real estate agent because of the firm they work with. I suspect that in most cases, it's the person. So that real estate agent has their own brand. They happen to work for a real estate firm. There's four keys, elements of branding that I'll touch on. One is, and I've already mentioned this before, your business objectives and marketing positioning. Branding, as I mentioned, is a way to accomplish your business objectives. First of all, you have to get clear about what your business objectives are. And that might take you an amount of weeks, months, or years to get real clear about that. I'm going to talk about my son's business a little later on, and I'll give you some insight into the process that he had to go through to figure out his own business. You have to figure out, well, what sets you apart once you get clear about what your product or service is? What sets you apart? And it can be any number of things. Companies have made huge successes of themselves based on small changes in what was available from them compared to what was available from their competitors. You need to determine your main message. What is the primary message that you want people to know about your company, your product, or your service? If they were to visit your website, does it pop out at them right away? You want to manage your reputation. Once you get a brand up and running, boy, you've got to make sure that you manage and make sure that you protect that brand. You got to put a iron fence around that brand. And there's many times, all of us who are on this webinar, you've looked up a restaurant or you've looked up a hotel to see what people have to say about it. And hopefully they have 4 and 5 star all the time, but they get some 1 and 2 stars. And even when I see a whole bunch of 4 and 5 stars, I think, well, they're probably doing fine, but I can't help myself. I look at the 1 and 2 stars and say, what the heck did they do wrong with this person? So one thing you always want to do if you're in business, if somebody gives you the opportunity, like Google does, to talk to the person who's slammed you, make sure you do that. Of course, we were in the family law business. Not everybody was happy with their divorce lawyer. We always encouraged our clients to make sure if somebody said something bad about them on Google or anywhere else, that they responded and address the issue. Don't hide from it. You're always better off to have a positive response and stay above, take the high road, as it were.
Sorry to interrupt, Dan,
Go
just for
ahead.
a second. We have a tradition here at How About Some Marketing. At around half hour mark of the webinar, I make a small publicity announcement telling the attendees about the next month's webinar. And I'm going to share my screen just for a second, the entire screen. This one with the website. This is our website, How About Some Marketing. I have talked with our creative director to actually pull up a nice header, hero image, because we didn't have the chance to do so. This is where you can subscribe to the newsletter if you haven't done so already. And this is where you can sign up for the next month's webinar. I'm going to drop the link as well, but next month's webinar, it's a very important topic, cybersecurity for businesses. With a cybersecurity expert, Christian Bucur from Montreal. He's going to touch based on everything, the basics of what can you do in order to secure and to protect yours and your customers' data. So if you want to join, I'm going to drop the link in the chat. And speaking of the chat, we already have some questions. Feel free to put all of the questions that you have for Dan in the chat that sits at the bottom right of this window. And then, do you want to take the questions at the end, or do you want to take them as they go? How do you want to go about it?
Well, I'm looking at, where does the failure rate come from? So somebody's asked that question. Where did I get that information? I'm not quite sure.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so it's basically what I pulled from the internet. I went to a bunch of different sources. So I went to look, government sources. If you look, the Canadian government has some information about business failure and success. Better Business Bureau, I believe I looked at the Canadian Better Business Bureau or the Ontario Better Business Bureau. That's why I had such a range, because in one place I'd find 50, another place I'd find 75. I hope that answers your question. But a large percentage of businesses fail. And I don't know, hopefully that answers your question. Is there another one?
No, I just dropped the link. I'll be monitoring them. And if you see any questions that you want to answer live, then that's fine. If not, at the end, maybe we can take a few minutes just to go through them.
Okay, sounds good.
I encourage everyone to ask Dan all the questions that they have. I certainly have taken some notes. Now back to you, Dan. With
Okay.
David has put in a link with a statistic, I believe, about failure rates for Canadian firms. Thank you,
Okay.
David.
All right. Well, if I'm off mark, please check that out and see what it is. But a high percentage fail, I can tell you that for sure. So we're going to go back to branding and maybe give you a little bit of kind of hardcore information about what you can do if you want to brand your firm. This information you can find if you go looking for articles about branding. I'm not going to tell you anything that's not already out there, but I'll hopefully hit some highlights that will make sense to you that you can use. But before I go to the actual branding, I want to reinforce that you really need to get clear about your product or your service. And before you go out and brand it, because it's expensive to brand it and start a business and get things going without having some testing, to having some feedback from potential clients, to having some endorsements from clients or potential clients that you can go out there with. So I often see people blow their whole budget without testing it, their branding and marketing budget, that is. They spent all their money before they've actually tested the product and make sure that they work. So this is a place where you shouldn't rush, is at the beginning. And make sure you get the message clear. Make sure you're clear about what distinguishes you from other people. And the way to do that is to what's called a SWOT analysis, SWOT. And you've probably heard of this before. It stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So you go through the process and figure out, well, what are the strengths of your product or service? What do you think makes it stand out? What differentiates it from whatever else is in the marketplace? If you don't have any competitors, it's harder to figure out what differentiates you. You definitely have to test it. If there's nobody else out there selling the widget that you want to put out in the marketplace, you've got to make sure that people want it. And however you go about doing that, you've got to get it tested. You've got to get some feedback about it so you can make tweaks to it that would otherwise show up after you've spent all your money in branding and marketing, and the tweaks weren't made. The product just may fail because you didn't take enough time. So you're also, you might be having you might have a service as opposed to a product. Keep in mind that you may have to do some more education or fine tuning yourself. You may have to work on your appearance. You may have to work on English if it's not your first language. You may have to work on what your office looks like. People will judge and evaluate you based on a whole bunch of things. And you want to put your best foot forward whenever you're stepping into a new business enterprise. Whether that's, again, your product or your service, you're going to be judged and evaluated. And people will choose to work with you, hire you, or buy your products based on their feelings often. And so you want them to have the best feeling possible. That goes for who's your receptionist. If you have a person that that walks into your office and they're the first person that they meet. I went into many offices over the years, and some offices look nice to me and some offices are a mess. And I would figure, gee, if this person's office is a mess, or their car is a mess, or their home's a mess, then I figure that if I dealt with them, my case or my work with them, it would be a mess. So it would lower my expectations. So people are judging, evaluating all the time. We all know that social media is nonstop, and it's more negative than positive, unfortunately. So, so the SWOT analysis, you figure out what is your strength. You look at what are your weaknesses. What do you not know enough about? What about your product is not as good as somebody else's product or service? Because that can become a strength, or it just becomes a place where you understand you're not going to go down that tunnel. You're not going to try and get that segment in the market because it's just not your strong point. You're going to go over to this area of the market where you are stronger. Because you can differentiate yourself, your business, or your product on so many different fronts. Where you get it from, how much it costs, how fast you can deliver it, the customization options on your product. It's endless if you think about it, how people have differentiated their businesses. And I'm going to talk about my son's business, Hollis Morris, a lighting and furniture company. He jumped into a very busy market. So I'll talk about that in a moment. What is your unique value proposition? So people sometimes call it a unique value proposition. Sometimes they call it a unique selling proposition. What distinguishes you? You've got to have something to distinguish you. Unless you're the only one in the market, there's got to be some way to help yourself stand out. The thing is, if you can create more ways that make you distinct, it's harder for anybody else to copy you, because successful products are always followed by somebody else who's going to do the same thing. And they might do it better, faster, or cheaper. So you've got to make sure that your product stands out, and there's a variety of ways that it stands out ideally. It's not necessary, but it's an ideal if you have something unique about your product. You want to figure out, if you already have customers, figure out, well, what do customers say about you? You may have to interview your customers, and people do this all the time. Every time I buy something, I then get an email saying, please rate us, tell us about the product, and companies are doing it all the time. The way to really get quick response, and perhaps best response, is to do it in person. If you can do it with your clients, people are buying your products, you do a quick survey with them. Nobody wants to answer a survey that's this long. 1 or 2 questions would be great, and it can be done in almost any business. Find out what people think of you in your business community. If you're in X business, what do other people in the business community think of you? Because those responses are going to reflect on your business, and they're going to affect the type of business you get or you don't get. So make sure you're well thought of in whatever business you might be thought of. Then it's also important to be well thought of within your community, within whatever geographic area you're doing business, because people have an image, they have an opinion of you. And that goes down to your employees. I said in the introduction that I would talk about branding in a bigger perspective than you would normally think of. Well, how you treat your employees, what they think of you, and how other people think you treat your employees also is a reflection of your brand. And now, if an employee leaves you, or even if they don't leave you, they can go on Glassdoor, for instance, and they can say great things about you, or they can say horrible things about you. And if a company is thinking about using your product or service, they'll likely do some research. And if Glassdoor pops up and people learn that you treat your employees poorly, and nobody on the site says you treat them well, then they may decide not to choose your firm to work with. So you have to cover all the bases to make sure you protect your brand. And so you have to treat people like you'd like to be treated yourself. Sorry, I'm starting to sound like a father, but I've been in business for a long time, and I've seen how negative reviews have hurt my business and have hurt my clients' businesses. It's critical. Then you need to execute your branding message. So you clarified what your strengths, your weaknesses, your product, all that sort of stuff. Now you need to put it in a package, and you need to get the message out to the world. But you got to create that message. How are you going to create the message? Well, I'll go back to my earlier conversation about how, if you're not a professional and this is not your expertise, this is a time to lean on an expert to help you create the brand, to help you create the message. Because you might be just too close to it, or you don't have the know-how to create your own branding message. And guaranteed, if you're working with a professional, they'll see and catch opportunities that you would probably never see yourself. Business is challenging enough as it is. Make sure you hire professionals. I think I've pounded on that enough. I'm going to talk for a moment about Hollis Morris. And Hollis Morris is my son's company, and it's a company I've been working with for 2 years. And I'm going to talk about the branding of his firm. If you can open up another screen on your website, you can have a look at Hollis Morris, and you'll see lighting and furniture products in the home page. And you'll see all that. You can drill down and look at the lighting and the individual products. The company was started in my garage about 15 years ago. And it started because I was building a cottage outside of Toronto. And thank you for showing the pictures. I was building a cottage, and I wanted a table, a nice big dining table. And at that time, 15 years ago, there was something called live edge tables, which were just starting to come out in the marketplace. And so I had a live edge table made. Live edge just means that there's bark around the outside of it. It's a wide table. It's really just 2 pieces of wood on top of a metal base. And I thought, well, that's really looks nice. And my son, Misha, who owns Hollis Morris, thought it looked nice too. We were then building our office, Divorce Marketing Group's office back then, about 15 years ago. And I said, well, why don't you can you build a couple more of those tables for us that we'll use in the office? Long story short, that's how we started into business. It was almost an accident. He liked the idea of building things, and he had experience renovating a ship, believe it or not. And he'd done a lot of interior work on the ship, and the whole ship, inside and outside, had been completely renovated. And and reworked. And so we found it quite comforting to have had that experience, to bring that precision that you need to properly doing lighting and furniture. Today, Hollis Morris has 25 employees. They just opened last November a 14,000 square foot office and manufacturing facility in Toronto. And last week, I happened to be in Mexico City, and I was calling on architecture and interior design firms in Mexico City. My main job now is to set up appointments for my son's salespeople in mainly California, Texas, New York, New Jersey, to have them introduce Hollis Morris. So why am I bringing up Hollis Morris? Well, it's not to sell you Hollis Morris products, but if you want to buy them, you're welcome to do so. It's because I can talk from a personal experience about what I see as an outsider, because I really wasn't involved in his company at the beginning. He really did it on his own. And I can tell you the process that he went through. So he, as I mentioned, he started out with live edge tables. And then what happened is that the market became saturated. They're fairly easy to build. And so a lot of people got into the market. And so Misha decided, well, that's the end of that. I'm going to see, I like doing furniture. And at the time, that's all he was doing was furniture, no lighting. What could I design and build in the area of furniture that would suit people who are building modern homes, new offices? He liked the modern look of things. So he started creating furniture products to suit that market. And then he started to do lighting. Now lighting accounts for 80% of his business. So two things I want to mention about that. One is that he wasn't absolutely sure what he wanted to do when he started, number one. And it was only after he had done it for a while that he got clear about where he wanted to go in the business. When he was doing live edge tables, he was selling them on Kijiji. It's not like he was doing a big branding thing for a firm. He really didn't launch Hollis Morris, which, by the way, is a cross street in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where he went to school, Hollis and Morris. That's how he came up with the name. He really didn't start branding that firm until about 10 years ago. But once he started branding, he was very clear about what he wanted to do. He wanted to create high quality products. And I mentioned to you before, that was his first thing. He wanted to create high quality products. He wanted them to be unique in the marketplace. And I'll tell you a bit more in a moment. Before doing this presentation, I looked up another statistic, by the way, and I mentioned this earlier. How many firms in the world, how many lighting firms are there in the world? I looked up. And the number, by the way, is 63,788. And 17,213 of them are in the United States. That's where Hollis Morris does 80% of his business. I mentioned that for a couple of reasons, that he really has identified a niche and built a niche for his company in a marketplace where there's at least 17,000 competitors. Now, of course, not all of these competitors are direct competitors to what he offers, but it's a market that there's no shortage of lighting companies. There is no shortage of furniture companies. I mention it to you because just in case you're thinking about doing a business or you're already in business and there's lots of competition, so what? If you've got a better product, if you've got a better service, if you've got a clearer vision, if you've got a commitment to stay on top of it, if you've got a commitment to grow, expand, develop, and you're willing to work hard and do whatever you need to do, and the market is right for it, then you can be a success, like Hollis Morris has been a success. So when I mentioned these numbers and discussing the size, what he managed to do was to create a brand. And I'm going to read something to you that's from a magazine that did an article on Hollis Morris. And here's what they said. They said, Hollis Morris is dedicated to handcrafted modern furniture and lighting, which complements both residential and commercial spaces. No corners are cut during the creation process, honoring hard work and sustainability, while producing modern designs that stand the test of time. Clean lines, generic shapes, and unique materials make Hollis Morris an instant favorite. Well, that's a pretty good representation of your brand. If somebody like a magazine, which this was, said that about Hollis Morris, clearly the messaging from their website, the Hollis Morris website, clearly the products, their brochures, their experience at interior design and architecture shows. Somehow that message that they created landed on this person and has landed on many people. As I mentioned, my job for the past 2 years has mainly been reaching out to architecture and interior design firms to set up appointments for our salespeople to do presentations. And I often hear two things when I call them up. They say, "Oh, we're already fans of Hollis Morris." Now, I used to be in the divorce business talking to family lawyers. I didn't have any fans. They grudgingly marketed their firm and used my services. But in the cases of interior designers and architecture firms, they love products. They love great products. The second thing that I always hear, and I have done some presentations like I did last week in Mexico, is that these products look like art. So Hollis Morris has managed to differentiate itself and set itself apart from the competitors because their products are beautiful. They're functional as well, and people recognize that also when I talk to them. But they're beautiful products. So that there's a strong, strong commitment throughout the company to create something that looks beautiful, but also is functional, but also will last a long time. So the lights start at $1,000.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
I don't know. Siri's talking to me now.
I don't have an answer for that. Is there something else I can help with?
No. And so they, have a look at the brochure just so you get an idea of the investment. Where they've made the investment is producing quality products, testing those products, making sure before they go to market with products that they have the capacity to provide the products that are needed. And they have a commitment to creating new products on an ongoing basis. And when somebody looks at, because I've sat with the architects and interior designers, they go through the products, they all feel that there's a consistent look and feel to it. It's not like we have products that have fancy feathers on them, or nothing wrong with products with feathers on them, or a lot of bling to them. That's just not the style. So he's stuck with a modern, clean look. He's taken away rather than adding to it. More is not more in the case of Hollis Morris. I'm going to see if there's any other questions that people have. Excuse me. Emanuel, that's pretty well the end of my presentation.
Uh-huh. We have. So, as a therapist starting my own practice, I understand the importance of differentiating services in a crowded market. Consider I'm selling a intangible service rather than a product. What strategies would you recommend to make me stand out and communicate unique value propositions to potential clients?
Well, I would always ask the person what makes you unique, and so I'm not going to find out what makes you unique, but there are things about you that makes you unique. Where you grew up, who your parents are, your schooling, what your interests are, and what your abilities are, what you're most interested in, area you're most interested in working on. Is it with children? Is it with adults, etc.? So if you sit down and write a list of what makes you unique in all those areas and more, then that will help you clarify how you go out to the marketplace to differentiate yourself. It could be cultural, it could be because of your race, it could be any number of things that you have an understanding that somebody else doesn't have, that can benefit you and can benefit your clients in terms of your business. So you have to do the SWOT analysis and spend a lot of time figuring out what your strengths are, also looking at your weaknesses, but focusing on your strengths. The other thing I'll mention to you is talk to other people. If you have clients, ask them why do they hire you? Ask them why they would recommend you or not recommend you. You need to dig deep to find out what is really at your core that differentiates you from anybody else in that type of business.
Excellent question and an excellent answer. I took a lot of notes and I wanted to probably perhaps ask you so many questions. I'll have the privilege and the advantage that I can shoot you an email anytime, and you've been kind enough to answer most of my questions, patient enough for a few years now.
Glad to do so.
If people want to contact you, how they can say hi, or
Couvrette Dan at Gmail is the best way to reach me. Couvrette Dan at Gmail.
whoever sign up for this webinar will get a copy of the presentation that we actually didn't share. But as said in the description, Dan really made a take no prisoners uh, presentation that I'm simply amazed, and I had an excellent time. Again, Dan, thank you so much for putting this together and for agreeing to be a host. The only thing I can ask right now is for you to consider perhaps sometime next year to be part of another presentation and to enhance even more the information that you already shared.
Sure. Always glad to talk to people. Hopefully it's been a benefit to those who listened in.
That said, thank you everyone who registered for this webinar. I'm pretty sure, I don't think, I'm confident that you have gained at least one piece of information that you can take action on right away and improve your business and even your life, not just limited to the business. That being said, I'm Emmanuel. Information about the How About Some Marketing project, upcoming webinars, recordings of the past webinars, including the one from today, are available at howaboutsomemarketing.com. And a reminder to sign up for the next webinar, which is the last Thursday of each month, April 25th, starting 7 p.m. EST, where we're going to talk about cybersecurity for your business. Thank you so much. See you next time.